topic that I presented at this conference on is about people whose behaviour has changed after a brain injury, and that behaviour has caused challenges for themselves and others. And I was talking about an approach we've been doing research on and helping people learn, which is using positive behaviour support principles, and we call it PBS+.
Interesting. So you said, it sounded like to me that you almost think that some brain injuries don't result in. I thought every brain injury resulted in some sort of change in the personality or the identity.
Well, I think every brain is different and every person is different, so each injury is going to affect people differently in different ways. So behaviour change is really common. We're looking at maybe around 70%.
Yes.
So pretty high, so more people than not, but there will be some people who don't experience behaviour change that causes problems.
So would you say that those that perhaps don't experience behaviour change, would you say that would be more on the mild side or the concussion side of brain injury?
Yeah, typically, but then there are also people, because it depends on where the brain's been affected, because different parts of the brain do different things.
Of course.
So for someone, maybe it's their vision that's been affected, or their memory, but maybe not behaviour.
Yeah.
So it's really individual. Yeah.
I know my personality. I recently heard, because I always thought that personality changed, but I recently heard it came from Canada. Somebody said identity change, and that just rang true for me. It's actually not character. It's not personality. It's identity change, and the identity, change. The change of identity trickles through to so many different areas of the personality and of the character.
Yeah, I also had that aha moment when I learnt about the concept of identity. And it really links to brain injury as such an important way to understand what someone is going through. And in our research, we did some of, as far as I know, the first research where we asked people with brain injury themselves about behaviour change.
Isn't that interesting?
It was the family members or clinicians or other people that were asked. So I did lots of interviews and I asked people about what's happened and what's changed in their behaviour. And I organised all those ideas, and one of the key findings that came out was about identity and how their identity has changed because of the injury, and how having behaviour issues also affected their identity. Like, I never used to be a fighter, but now if someone pushes me, I'll just hit them.
Yes.
That's who I am now. I've changed. And that can be really hard. I was somebody who had all these different aspects to my sense of identity. I was a brother, I was a student, I was working, I was doing a band with my mates, and now I'm someone with a brain injury, and that's become my whole identity.
Yes.
Or I'm someone who's the angry guy, and that's my identity. So that's become a really important place to work on in the intervention and the support we're providing, is helping to sort of map out, well, what does that identity look like? How did you see yourself before? How do you see yourself now? And most importantly, how would you like to see yourself? What would a really positive and valuable and rounded identity look like? And can we kind of separate out those parts into different components so we can better understand how we can help you get there and what that would look like in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, that would have been so helpful for me when I sustained my injury, because at the time of the injury, I was a performer, I was a dancer, I was on stage, I was basically eating a bit at the time, and then all of a sudden I was in nappies and I couldn't sit up and I couldn't control myself, and I was a different person. And so incidentally, all those people that were surrounding me when I was working in the nightclub scene, when I was working in the entertainment scene, they all dropped away fairly quickly. And what was awful was that that was my life, and that had been my life since the early 90s. And then I got hit in 99, and then I still think maybe I retained maybe about 5 old friendships, and basically everybody else dropped away. And the grief of losing myself, I would have to say came second to me losing my relationships. And because relationships, well, that's how you identify yourself. That's how you mark out your boundaries. Is through the relationships that you foster and that you continue. And yeah, it's such an awful loss. And I'm really excited to hear you're doing this.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting and heartbreaking about what you've described is it was more than those relationships. It was your community. They were your people.
Absolutely.
This was your world. You were, so committed. This was your identity in terms of how you saw yourself and what you did and where you went and who you hung out with. And that was a beautiful and important part of who you were.
Yeah, it was my career too. So,
And your career.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. It's a way of earning income and the progress you expected to have. It was so important. And after an injury, it wasn't just about how you saw yourself. It was those relationships that shifted.
Yes.
And it can be, a very, very heartbreaking and something to grieve.
It's devastating.
And to come to terms with is not something necessarily you will get to that point of going, oh, okay, I accept that. It's really tough. And so we're seeing that there was this, we found a number of other themes, but to take identity for an example, that was something that you could only really learn from speaking to the person themselves. That wasn't something that other people were really identifying. So it was so valuable to learn that, and then to look at how behaviour and identity and these other factors, it went both ways. So if you have a real kind of less than identity, then that might contribute to feeling more frustrated and acting out. But also having frustrations and difficulties with your behaviour also informs your identity. And then you see yourself as this person who's a fighter or a crazy man or someone who can't sort of be appropriate in social situations. And so what we're doing with our intervention approach is that it's not all about let's just work on that behaviour. We have to reduce your problem behaviours or your challenging behaviours. It's actually, let's look at you as a whole person. And anytime we're helping you with your identity, what's meaningful, your way you spend your time, those relationships, we're also helping you with your behaviour. And it means the focus is really shifted from behaviour intervention to helping someone build a meaningful life.
Yes.
And learning to self-regulate behaviour and the other obstacles that get in the way of that good life.
Well, having a meaningful life would go a huge part of the way to actually helping you regulate yourself anyway. Can I ask you, what brought you to study this? What was it that initiated the interest in your studies?
Well, I've been interested in brain injury for my whole research career, really, and I find it quite inspiring to work with people who often their life has changed in a moment. And people work so hard to build a good life and to understand themselves, and I see that as a really optimistic trajectory of things are going to get better. And so that really compels me to help people with brain injury. And then to work specifically with challenging behaviour, and particularly this approach. My mentor, my hero is Tim Feeney, who's an American
I've heard of that name.
Therapist, and he's with his mentor, who was Mark Ilvasaka, had really led the field in our world of working in this way, in this really person-driven, humanist way. And he's a very inspiring, hardworking, innovative clinician, and I've learnt from him. And our research was to take this model of this way of working and do some research to kind of help get the evidence for, is this actually improving people's outcomes?
So, have you seen the integration of working with peers? Have you seen that expand or magnify or multiply in the last years? Is it, or has it? I seem to feel that peers are finally getting their their place in the sun in a way, you know. I kind of feel that peers are finally being recognised as the authorities they are. I wonder if you've got anything to say about that.
I actually think that that's one of the most important and valuable ways for us to help people to expand our research to make sure it's authentic. There's a term called co-design, which has become more and more mainstream. And at the research centre I work at, the Monash Epworth Rehabilitation Research Centre, I lead the co-design and community translation work there. And so that's a big part of my work. So for example, I do another topic around cyber safety, and someone who was from my clinical practice, Colin, he unfortunately experienced a romance scam, and there wasn't research and there wasn't resources available of how to help Colin. So Colin and I, for the last 10 years, have been leading work to develop the evidence and support services, and we have now a brand new therapy program where we help people who are struggling with being scammed and the aftermath of that, and those are group therapy sessions that are co-facilitated by people with lived experience.
Wonderful.
So they're called Scambassadors.
Oh wow.
and it's a peer group, and it's been really powerful to see how the generosity and the care and the skill in people supporting each other.
We spoke with Jenny Ponsford yesterday, and my parents told me that she was actually one of my doctors, because I was at Epworth in 1999. I was at the Bethesda, and that's where I did my recovery. So Epworth has always been so leading, really, hasn't it, when it comes to things like the reason I stayed in Melbourne, because I'm originally from Adelaide. The reason I stayed in Melbourne when I had the accident was because they were running that running program, Gavin Williamson, and I could literally run before I could walk. You know, but that's really interesting, and I just think Epworth is so world leading, and it's fantastic that we have that in Melbourne.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I've been with Jenny Ponsford for my entire research career, and she's so inspiring, and what she's accomplished has changed practice internationally and helped so many people. Yeah,
I was so excited to hear the study on sexuality after brain injury. That was such a huge part of my recovery, you know, and the fact that sexuality was used as a way for me to feel that I was accepted post acquiring my disability because of the rejection and the isolation that I was facing as well. I think it's really, really exciting. Are you doing anything in that area too, or is there? Well, you did the romance scam, so that
it's all connected.
Yes,
really.
It is. Yeah.
And I think, you know, with our research, like sometimes there are topics that are more or less fashionable or more and less sexy.
Yes.
And sexuality's not been a really sexy topic, ironically, for researchers. So I think that's really instrumental, and there is overlap because the most common type of scam we see are romance scams. People with a brain injury, many are looking for support and understanding.
Yes.
And the scammers actually take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
They manipulate people by saying, I've been through trauma too. I have been through loss and I understand you. Or they might say, I don't care you've got a brain injury. I think you're amazing. I think you're beautiful just as you are. And that's a beautiful thing if someone's really saying that to you, and everyone deserves to be accepted. But people are doing that with bad intent to take advantage, manipulate, and take your money.
Yes.
And they might not ask for that money for 6 months.
Yes.
You're just hearing all the love and the beautiful support. So it's a really normal thing to want to connect and have understanding and love and romance, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's about, who do you trust?
Yeah.
And so our work has led to supporting Brain Injury Matters peer groups around relationships, around dating, around friendships and family. And Ellie Fraser, who you saw present on the sexuality work, she's been helping with that. And now we're also working into the space of how do you want to avoid being in a romance scam. We're working on helping you with that side, but then how do you date well after brain injury?
Absolutely, yes.
So many challenges in that space.
Yes. So just stepping away from the topic quickly, just maybe, how important do you see a conference such as Brain Injury Australia? How do you see it being important to the sector?
I have to say, honestly, that this has been, I think, the best conference I've been to in my career. I have been so energised by the amazing, different, diverse perspectives and the discussions that are happening in this space. It feels like this is the forefront of the conversations that need to happen because everyone is in the room, everyone is included, everyone has a voice, and it moves us away from the echo chamber of just the researcher clinicians speaking with each other, and how I can get really impressed by all the great research that's happening.
Yes.
But when we're all doing very similar great things, how do we take it to the next level? And I think that the way we do that is by ensuring we're having the hard conversations, that we're challenging our ideas, and that we're seeing where the gaps are and where we need to progress and move into the space, because we have in the room, in the moment, the people that know best, the people with lived experience, the families, the carers, the funders who can talk to the challenges.
Yes.
Everyone being here makes such a difference, and I've been to this conference many times, and it's just amazing what Nick Rushworth and his board and the team and the volunteers have accomplished, and how much it's grown.
Yes.
All these concurrent sessions and talking about important topics that might not get the limelight, like sexuality, like domestic and interpersonal violence, and really giving these important topics a platform, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, wonderful. I wonder, Kate, have you been to international conferences, and how do you see this comparing with international conferences?
So I'm lucky enough to regularly go to international conferences, and I was in Vancouver this year, I'll be in New Orleans next year, last year was Dublin for international conferences, and a lot of these are very big, established, respected conferences, but I really feel like what we do in Australia is world-leading, cutting edge, and it's a really good point, because I don't think I've really seen lived experience at those other conferences.
Really? That's interesting, because you kind of assume that Australia is lagging, especially when it comes to social model of disability and, you know, the perception of disability. I'm really surprised.
Yeah, I'm obviously biased, but I do think that we are doing absolutely world-leading work in Australia, and I get to see that when I go to the conferences and I see what people are talking about and how they understand ideas and the kind of research that they're doing, and I think we were doing that a while ago. We are really progressed from there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's lovely. That's fantastic to hear, and I think that's a really lovely point to finish this interview on. Thank you so much for talking to me, Kate.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Yeah.